Hey, welcome back to WizNugs. Today we're talking about depression, why diagnosis can be helpful, and some concrete steps that we can take short-term and long-term to help deal with it. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart because this is something that runs in my family, and I myself have had a nice long bout with it. And specifically, I think it's worthwhile for people who have been going through it to know that there are others going through it as well, to know that you're not alone in your symptoms, and to be able to really feel a sense of, I don't even know if community is really the right term, because you don't necessarily need a community of people that all feel depressed together.
Why did it matter to you to actually have like a name to it or a diagnosis for it?
The real big kicker, I think, is that when you have a name, a label to put on it, it's not even so much about the label itself. It's that you have a way of differentiating now between this is me before, this is normal me, and then this is depressed me.
Right.
And to say that that's a specific thing, to be able to actually call that out and say, this is a thing, this is a specific thing with a specific set of characteristics.
Did you feel that it's now actionable? Like you could take action on it?
Well, I mean, for starters, it wasn't even the action part of it. It was more the learning. It was about being able to go and look up what are resources for people with depression. What are some science-based, statistic-based techniques or ideas, or just learning more about it. I mean, that's kind of my personality anyway, as I'm a compulsive researcher. So that's why just all these random like facts just start popping out of like, oh yeah, there was a study about that.
And your vocabulary is where it's at as well, right?
I mean, it all just comes from reading so dang much.
So what were first steps for you?
So for me, one of the most important things was kind of like I mentioned, to be able to set that line in the sand and say that these are depressed Casey behaviors.
Okay.
That doesn't define me. That's not me.
Right.
I mean, yes, obviously it was me that was living through that and me that was exhibiting those behaviors, but that the thought patterns and the behaviors were not my normal way of being. It was me under the influence of depression.
Right.
So I could say, okay, well, if I now want to use that as a comparison, I can take memories of when I was happy, when I could feel joy about things. I guess that's useful to kind of get into a little bit too.
Sure. Well, it goes back to one of our things that we talked about, which was the cognitive reframing. And when it's diagnosing yourself to find out when was I last happy, right? And then trying to figure out at what point in time did that go away.
Yeah. And for cognitive reframing specifically, that's like a part of it is diagnosing the reason that you're feeling that way so that you can take action about that thing differently. In this case, it was as much to try and reclaim a part of that identity, because my identity had become that of me with depression. And so there was, to go into like a little bit of that identity thing, a lot of times I think there's a understanding of depression as being like an intense sadness, like lots of crying. And that's possible. From what I've read, that's actually a very common symptom in women with depression.
But not so much in men?
Right.
So for you...
So manifestation of depression in men has a tendency to be a little bit more under the radar, because in general, men have a tendency to get on with it.
Right.
There's a sense of, man up, and you just got to keep going to work, because if you don't go to work, then your family doesn't eat.
Right.
Whereas I think with women, there's more of an understanding or an expectation that you're going to be more in touch with your feelings. And so that taking that time to get in touch or to feel it is a little bit more understood.
Yep.
Whereas I think for men, it's more of, I don't know if stigma is really the right word, but it's more of an expectation that you're just going to get on with it. Do what you got to do.
Yeah. We think about our typical gender roles and men being the provider. And if you feel that you can no longer be the provider because you're going through something like this, then that just compounds on top of, I would imagine.
Yeah. And in fact, technically speaking, my official diagnosis was not depression.
Okay.
It was,
well, that's good,
something about maladaptive stress disorder. I mean, it's 6 of one, half dozen of another. The symptoms were the same, and the treatment is basically the same, at least for me. So that first one, really, really, to be able to draw that line and to be able to say, these are symptoms of depressed Casey. This is what depressed Casey does. And regular Casey enjoys listening to music and singing along. Regular Casey enjoys playing the guitar. Depressed Casey didn't pick up a guitar for years.
Yeah.
But regular Casey, that's one of my hobbies.
Yeah.
Reading was another one that when I'm feeling normal and I don't know if level is really the right term, but
Sure.
when I'm not when I'm not deeply depressed, reading for me is a great like passion. I love reading. Primarily fiction, but fair amount of nonfiction too. I've read a bunch of psychology books and parenting books and things like that to try and understand how to deal with my children, things like that.
Sure. Like you said, once you've gotten into the idea that you know a thing or are aware of a thing, then you want to find out as much as you can. It's that researcher in you.
Right. And then to be able to parse out which parts of that I'm going to take in and use and make part of me.
Right.
Another good actionable item to take is to make a list of activities that you did previously enjoy.
Okay. Yeah. That's always a good thing. Try to focus on doing something that you have on your list of what makes you happy.
Yeah. So in my case, to go back just a half a step, because I've realized I didn't finish that tangent.
I apologize.
No worries. It was that instead of the sadness, it's more of a numbness.
Right.
It's kind of like an empty, just nothing that I did felt like it mattered. I didn't really particularly feel like anybody cared, even though like my wife and kids would all the time be like, "Oh, I love you. Oh, I'm so glad you're here." It just didn't connect. It didn't register that
really
that mattered.
Yeah.
And then like, going to work was just a slog. It was just something I had to do. I had a commute that was like an hour and a half each way, plus a 9-10 hour day. It was always end of the day. Boss would come around with some new thing. And of course, everyone else was already gone. So he'd bring it to me and that would fall on my desk. And it was like, oh man.
And I worked with you at that location. And even though I wasn't cognizant of some of the things that you went through, I know who your boss was because he was my boss. And I know that he had a proclivity of dumping things on you at the last moment.
I was dependable, I guess. And that's a good thing.
Sure.
Trying to look for silver linings now that I'm not in that headspace.
Right.
And I mean, I got to say, I learned a lot at that job. Now, afterwards, I can say that the way that I handled my stress while I was there wasn't healthy at all. And then on top of that, my wife at home had a newborn daughter at the time, who we love dearly. But at that time, she was also going through some stuff with postpartum depression. And
right.
Me being in a stress-induced depressive state and her being in postpartum depression, there was really a lot going on that was just difficult to work through.
Sure.
So to make a list of activities that I previously enjoyed was not immediately helpful in terms of me just feeling like, oh, okay, well, I'll do that and now I'll feel better. Everything will be great.
Well,
but it was helpful to be able to have that list of things to look back on and to be able to, when I had time to myself, to be able to say, okay, I'm going to at least attempt one of these things on this list.
And from my memory, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you really were aware of what was going on with you while you were at the previous job site.
Oh, no, I didn't know that I had depression. I knew that I was angry and I knew that I was numb.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize what was going on until my wife encouraged me to go to counseling, and I did, and there you go.
So what was next for you after you were diagnosed? Not with depression, but with the diagnosis that they gave you.
Well, I mean, close enough, right?
Sure.
For me, at least.
I just want to be clear that, that as you stated, whatever the diagnosis was, that it is what it is. It still falls within that same paradigm.
So one of the big things was exercise.
Okay.
And we've talked about this before, how getting exercise is huge in terms of endorphins, neurotransmitter regulation. So things like dopamine, serotonin, all these things are impacted by exercise. It helps level out the body in a similar way that sleep does. Both of those things are just immeasurably important. I remember all through childhood and junior high and high school, if there was talk of exercise, it would be like, I specifically would sarcastically joke around of like, no, I ain't running unless something's chasing me. Or like,
oh, that's my mentality even now. I'm just, I don't need to be the fastest. I just need to be faster than the guy next to me.
My attitude toward exercise now is drastically changed. I've spoken about nerd fitness in the past, and this was something that I found before my diagnosis, but also going to the gym and picking up heavy stuff was for me that real change.
Okay. Was it really cathartic for you?
I not during that moment. It wasn't like picking up heavy things made me feel like a man and therefore I felt good.
Right.
It wasn't cathartic in terms of like sometimes people talk about like breaking plates or smashing things or whatever.
Yeah.
No, none of that. I just noticed that afterward I would feel more even keel.
Okay.
So I started doing that before I started going to counseling, and that kind of helped. And then the counselor was like, that's really, really like number one in terms of things that therapists and counselors and psychologists and psychiatrists recommend for depression is get exercise.
Okay.
It's one of those things that you can put on your calendar and you can do it mechanically. Because at first, when you're trying to climb out of depression, everything is going to feel mechanical. And you do it because you know that you need to do it.
Right. Well, you're already in that mentality because you're already going to work because you have to, and you're already dealing with the family because you have to. And it's not because of a feeling of wanting or belonging. It's I got to keep moving.
Yeah. So exercise is one really big one that's fairly actionable. So if you're starting from sedentary, you might want to go with like just do a couple of squats or maybe just a walk to the mailbox or whatever it is that's right for you in that position. But getting started on something and doing it consistently, that's one that the consistency is key.
Mm-hmm.
I read somewhere that I think it was 30 minutes of like strenuous exercise. So like not just going for a walk, but something a little bit more strenuous, like lifting weights or something bigger, maybe a, I don't know, Taibo class if people still do that.
P90X.
Right. Sure. That doing that kind of activity for like that 30 minutes in a day will last you for at least like 2 or 3 or 4 more days after that. So twice a week is kind of that minimum for keeping things level.
Okay.
But you know, if you can go on a walk every day, so you know, people who have gotten into weightlifting and fitness and exercise and all that will tell you that there's a workout day and then there's a rest day, and so you might do a lighter activity on the rest day. And I don't want to make this into an episode about exercise plans,
sure,
but you know,
but being that it's top on the list, right?
Yeah. So find something that works for you is really the key.
Right.
A couple of other actionable items that you can get started right away on is making sure you're drinking enough water.
Okay.
We've talked about in the past how hydration, like there are things about our emotions that we don't necessarily understand that are tied to our physical body. So, you know, hunger and anger can make you hangry.
But it amplifies, right? If you're not properly addressing your body's needs, that it amplifies any feeling that you might be going through.
Right. And then sleep. Again, I mentioned it kind of in line with exercise as being important, but sleep is huge. So whatever you can do to optimize your sleep, there's tons of books about this, of things you can do, but some of the basic ideas are eliminate light in the room as much as possible. So if you need blackout curtains or I found online on Amazon, there's these stickers that are they're like window tint almost, but they're little reusable stickers. So you can stick them over if there's a bright light on your clock radio, for example. You can just stick that over that. I mean,
does it block it out completely, or is it just like kind of just?
It depends.
Diffuses.
I have one light that I put on 3 or 4 of those.
Okay.
Just layered them.
All right,
to get it dim enough.
Yeah.
It depends on how bright the light is. It depends on, you know. And then I went on my clock radio and I just turned the brightness all the way off because I don't depend on it. I use my phone or my watch as my alarm clock. So I just didn't need that. And so I went around, and as I was like going around my room, I found more and more things to put these little stickers on. And now my room is almost completely black for sleep, and it's so good.
Now, how's the missus feel about it?
Well, she's still got her clock radio. That's the one light in the room, is her clock on her side is still reasonably bright.
And it's obscured from your view when you're sleeping?
It's enough that I can handle it.
Okay. Well, that's good.
So kind of along with this, you might need to get a thicker blanket or a thinner blanket, or for some people, a weighted blanket is comforting.
I know my daughter, for a good portion, had a couple of weighted blankets that she would use on occasion.
Optimizing your sleep. Those the ones that everybody talks about is don't have caffeine after lunchtime.
Yeah, something in that around that time frame. Yep.
And to turn off screens at least an hour before going to bed. I'm going to say this is another one to pull out of our gear versus stats video is make use of your alarms and your calendar. So if you block out your calendar to say that I'm going to be busy between, I don't know, whatever that is for you, 10 and 6.
Mm-hmm.
So for that 8-hour period, my calendar is going to show me as busy. And the way that a lot of these things interact, you can even set it up to say, so, and therefore my do not disturb will be on between 10 and 6 because I'm busy on my calendar. And it'll show to other people, don't talk to me right now. Leave me alone.
So is that what you ended up doing?
Yeah, I've got timers on my I don't know, time. I can't remember if it's a timer, a reminder, a calendar appointment or whatever, but I have this thing that pops up that says, hey, it's about time to go to bed.
Yeah.
And so that's my reminder to go charge my watch, to turn off TV, turn off screens. I got to put my phone down.
And that can be hard for all of us.
Yeah. Still a work in progress.
Yeah.
But some days I'm do better than others, but I'm still working on it. So for me, reading before bed on a paper book is still really helpful for me. That's a personal thing to me. That's on my list of stuff to do when you're feeling good.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't involve having a screen. So I have a small reading light and a chair in my room that I can sit in that's away from my wife so she can go to sleep and I can go sit in the chair with my little reading light and read an actual paper book.
Nice.
So I'm not getting screen glow in my face.
Right.
And not only that, but the scroll. The endless scroll.
Right.
There's no way. If you're reading a book, you can turn pages and you have, okay, well, I finished that page. Or you have chapters. So you get to the end of a chapter and say, that's it. I'm done with that.
Yeah, but with scrolling, it has to be force of will. Otherwise, because you
keeps going.
You don't ever hit, as the meme says, you've hit the end of the internet. It doesn't happen, right? So you have to have that mindset in place already to stop yourself and say, all right, when I hit this time, I have to stop. But I'm just as guilty of it as well.
And if you don't have a timer on or an alarm or a reminder of some kind that's tied to time,
right,
it's really easy to lose track of time. And the next thing you know, it's 3:00 in the morning and you got to get up at 6.
Yeah.
Or 7 or whatever.
Well, yeah, either of those times range are gross to me. So,
well, especially when compared with, I didn't go to bed till 3 because I was doom scrolling all night.
Yeah.
And then, to go along with that, there's the research that I talked about earlier about that people report a higher incidence of sadness when they're staying up late.
Yeah.
So it messes with your sleep. It's your circadian rhythms get mixed up. And then there's just a whole bunch of things that says sleep at night is good for you.
So it makes me think of when we talked about trying to increase and decrease friction in our habits, trying to increase the friction in the things that that you do that keep you up later or, make you look at screens longer than you need to.
Yeah. So another option might be, instead of plugging in your phone right next to your bed, maybe move that cord or that charger to the other side of the room.
Right.
So that way, this is another key to helping you get up early would be if your alarm is on the other side of the room, you have to physically get out of bed to go turn it off.
Shenanigans.
It's a whole...
I declare shenanigans on that one.
It's a world-changing behavior. Another one that ended up being highly personal for me that I had no clue until I went in for my physical with my doctor was he did a blood test and found out that I had a severe vitamin D deficiency.
Yeah, and we've talked about that before. We talked about how vitamin D deficiencies can give you symptoms that are similar to depression.
Yeah, so I don't know where one ends and the other one begins, but there you go. That's another one, is that sunshine can be a big deal. So, going for that daily walk for your mental health can be huge. It gets you a little bit of exercise. It gets you out of the house, fresh air, sunshine, change of scene. It usually forces people to get dressed in clothing instead of pajamas. And all these things can help you with that sense of stepping outside of the depression bubble.
So now that you have these actionable items that you can do, what's next after that?
So for some of the more longer term behaviors, definitely find people that you can discuss it with.
Mm-hmm.
Having it doesn't have to. It could be a support group. We've talked about the power of friendship in general,
right?
And having your accountability buddy, having your RPG party to go out on your game with,
right?
It's a lot easier to do it with others than it is to do it alone. Having a group of people that you can communicate with, especially about your mental health, is huge. To be able to mention it, just to be able to talk about it, to be able to say, I had a really awful day.
And I think that that's a large step. And speaking from experience, I know that's a hard thing to do for some people because they are of a personality type that would keep them kind of away from talking about those kind of things, because we have in our own minds how we see ourselves, and then we have how we think other people see us.
Mm-hmm.
And we would like to be able to maintain that type of vision from them. Like, I want them to see me as this person, this type of person. And if I start talking about the actual struggles that I have, is that going to diminish that vision? And that's a struggle that you may have to come to deal with. And like, it's okay. It's okay if they see you as more human, which is the way that I would see it, right?
So I remember reading about a study at work, actually, about the power of vulnerability in deepening relationships, and how, there's a difference between true vulnerability and just oversharing. If you just say, here's all the things that I'm dealing with, blah, and you just spit it all out, that's different than actually making connections with people over whether it be shared trauma or just saying like, yeah, this is something I'm going through right now.
Yeah. And I think it's always important and relevant to be able to express to somebody, friend, even sometimes even coworkers, that you might be going through something tough, right? It could be anything. And maybe asking for maybe not special treatment, but just some concessions. Like, I'm going through this thing. I would like to be able to talk to somebody about it. And maybe if you can't talk to somebody about it at work, at least make them aware that, hey, it's not your fault. It's something that I'm dealing with, but I'm going to be, a little bit withdrawn, but no, that has nothing to do with you. It's dealing with me. And when I come to a point that I feel that I can share it and talk about it, I'll let you know.
So it's something where, for me, it's about finding the specific people that I want to share these things with.
Right. And that's important. And I think what's important to note is every individual is going to find what works for them. And there isn't such a thing as a blanket cure. You have to snip some from here and take some from there. And then you're going to find the thing that works for you. And as long as you're staying positive and moving forward and working on these actionable items that you mentioned, you're going to eventually get progress and you'll get there.
Yep. Now, I have to take a little bit of issue with the idea of staying positive when in relation to depression, because you're not starting from a positive spot in the first place. But applying that in terms of recognizing that you want to do something about it.
Sure.
That you don't want to stay in that spot.
Right.
Is as in a meaningful sense, as much positivity as you need to be able to move forward and get to that more positive spot.
Yeah, for me, I think the way that I would, going back and re-describe it, would be doing the steps that get you away from the mode that you're currently in, right? So positive in this sense being not necessarily like cheery-go-lucky,
right.
But positive is, okay, I feel like I'm being a machine right now, and I feel nothing. Well, what can I do to change that?
Yep. And so that brings me to the next item, which is recognize that it's never completely over.
Right.
It's in a way similar to how I've heard alcoholism described, that if you're an alcoholic, then you might be an alcoholic who hasn't drunk in years. But if you have that tendency, then recognizing that tendency within you means, okay, I have to make sure that I'm paying attention to that. And in the same way, depression is one of those things that if you have that tendency, you might be in remission, to use a more of a medical term, but there's always that tendency. And so recognizing the symptoms, recognizing when you are starting to slide downhill, and being able to say, oh, wait a minute, I've gotten busy because I was feeling good. I didn't remember my steps. I didn't remember to go to the gym or take my walks, or gosh, it's been like a month since I reached out to somebody about this. Oh, my. Eesh.
Well, we go back to when we talk about creating new habits, that beating that pathway to create the new path. You have to recognize that your previous path is already the 8-lane highway.
It's still there.
And it's still there. Sure, it might be crumbling a little bit, but it's still there. That path is still there. It's being able to divert yourself away from that path, the known path.
Yeah.
And it can be hard.
And it's another one that I've mentioned before, for those longtime listeners, is that for me, a big metaphor that really connected was that counseling isn't depending on someone else to fix your problems,
right,
or to tell you what to do in
right.
your life. That they can give you tools to put in your toolkit, so that if you're driving along and your mental health car breaks down, you can take some steps, to some actions to work on it.
Yeah.
So consistent action over time is required, and recognize that things are going to get busy, things are going to get weird, things are going to get hectic, and you're going to start falling off of those steps. It happens unless you're 100% militant about it and keeping up with all of your calendar and reminders and all your tools to keep you on that. It's going to fade.
Yep.
And some new challenge is going to pop up, whether it's a death in the family or a divorce, or there's all kinds of
change of job,
stressful situations. What did they say? Death in the family, a divorce, buying or selling a house.
I would think any major event.
Was it job change? I think was the other one.
Well, it's career change or job change.
That these are all hugely stressful things that can really just knock the wheels right off your car.
Yeah.
So just, I mean, again, really, I hate to belabor the point, but it really is about consistency over time and recognizing that you're gonna slide, and that's fine. It's not a one and done, like I'm cured and now it's over and now I can move on and go back to my habits the way they were.
Right.
Because honestly, your habits the way that they were is one of the reasons that you got into that position in the first place, probably.
Right. And I always equate these kind of things to weight loss. And so what I mean by that is it took you a certain amount of time to get to the point that you decided that, okay, this isn't healthy for me. I got to change my habits. It's going to probably take an equal amount of time to get yourself out of that position, right? And so if you're being fair with yourself, which is hard because you're already in a mood of kind of beating yourself up, if you can be fair with yourself and say, this is going to take time. It's not a quick fix. It's not an overnight thing. I plan on getting to as close to how I was before. That's not a guarantee, but hopefully I can get really close so it's almost indiscernible. That doesn't mean I'm not going to have struggles. It doesn't mean that there aren't going to be events in my life that might take me to the known path. But I got to do what I can to stay on the new path that I want to do, and that's be not who I was.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to how disappointed I was in myself when I had my first relapse, to again borrow from addiction terminology.
Sure.
That I felt like I had screwed up because like I know what I need to do,
mm-hmm.
and I got myself out of this hole, and I was feeling good. Why am I here again? Why am I back in the spot again? And I felt like a loser because of it, because that's part of what depressed voice does.
Mm-hmm.
Is depressed voice in the back of your head is going to be the thing chiming at you saying, you're a loser. Look at you. You suck. You're awful. And that's, you know what? I almost forgot about this. I can't glad I went there. That's another big thing about dealing with depression and depressive tendencies is recognizing that your thoughts don't define you. Your thoughts aren't true just because they pop into your head.
Right.
You can look at, you can hold them out here and you can examine them and you can say, is there evidence for this? Is there evidence against this? What do I really want to, do I want to entertain this thought, or do I want to just let it go away and move on to something else that is going to be helpful for me?
Right. So is there anything else you'd like to add for people who might be dealing with this?
Couple of special notes. If you look at somebody who has, say, a thyroid problem,
mm-hmm.
and you'd expect them to take their medication on a regular basis to deal with their thyroid problem,
right?
You might be the kind of person that is going to benefit from medication for your depression. Not judging it. It ended up not being necessary for me. And you know, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But knowing that if that's something that you need, that doesn't make you less than, that doesn't make you broken, that you need a pill to help you level out and you know, climb out of that hole.
Well, it's going back to what we just said, in that everyone's going to be unique and everyone's going to have different things that work for them and some things that don't. So if it ends up being that medication is the right call, then yeah, take that path, take that chance.
Discuss it with your doctor. Talk about it with a professional that can evaluate your situation, and then keep up with it. If that's a thing that's working for you, keep up with it. And if you want to make changes, talk with your doctor about it. Do that with the professional. Don't just experiment on your own with going on and off and all that. That would be advice from someone who hasn't actually gone down that path, but I've seen its usefulness in others.
Right.
Also, counseling therapy is a great resource. If you start doing some of these things that we've mentioned and they are helping, and you're able to take the edge off and start making forward progress, that's awesome. Don't overlook the possibility that maybe talking with a trained professional about it might just be exactly the thing that you need. I'm still going. I go every other week, and it's been several years now. And I feel like I'm doing pretty well, but I still find that having that moment that I can just talk through all these things and be able to some of it's just venting, and some of it is getting advice and learning that I'm not broken for feeling, these things, and not having a large group of people that I can talk to about my feelings that have any more understanding than their own feelings.
Yep. And I just think it's part of the human condition. And everyone's different. Everyone's going to have different scenarios that they handle differently, unique to them because of their own unique perspective. So to try to fit yourself into a box or a box of normalcy, for lack of a better term, it's harmful sometimes.
Having those expectations and then feeling like you're not meeting your own expectations.
Right. It's one thing to
talk about putting yourself in a box.
Sure. And it's one thing to have expectations of others, which you should never do, but your own expectations of self, right? Because who did you let down? Yourself. And so we've mentioned it before. We're always our own worst critic when it comes to most things that we do.
Yep.
So getting ourselves out of that mindset and be like, oh, okay, I'm not the worst person on the planet. I'm not a terrible waste of time. I am worthy. I am special. I am loved and needed, and people appreciate me. So let me get out of this funk.
Yep. And just the one final note is that they're always working on research for more new treatments, things that can help people that if other treatments aren't helping or aren't working, that they're always working on new stuff. So don't give up. Keep working on it. Keep doing what you can to find something that will work for you, because there's plenty out there.
Thanks for joining us today on WizNugs. We hope that this was helpful. The only thing I would like to add is to make sure that if you're kind of feeling off, if you're kind of feeling that you're not who you would normally are and things are just kind of skewed, reach out to family members, reach out to friends, and if need be, reach out to counseling. You never know what might click and get you out of that funk.
I realized we forgot to mention, so we're trying something new out with our sound.
Yeah, so I have a tendency to be very loud, and it causes a lot of excess work on the sound part of stuff. So what we're trying to do now is we're really trying to fine tune things. And so we are trying now the headsets and having the mics a lot closer, mostly so I can hear myself.
Maybe a little more Joe Rogan style.
Kind of, right?
Mic right up in the mouth and headphones right on top. So we'll give it a shot.
Well, I do feel like it's being helpful, because as soon as I start to speak a little bit louder than I should,
you hear it right in your ear.
It starts to rumble, right? And that's kind of like the indicator, like, calm down, bring it down now. So
maybe your feedback at home would be helpful. Let us know if you think if this sounds better, if it looks better, if it looks weird.
Yeah. And then again, if you have any suggestions on any topics that you would like to have us talk about, we've gotten a couple in the past couple of weeks, and we've tried to cover them. Please feel free to leave a comment, and we will respond to you. Thanks again for joining us on WizNugs, and have a great night.
Thanks for joining us today on WizNugs. If you liked what you heard, spread the word. For more information, head over to myWizNugs.com.